How do you build a business model that stands the test of time? Today, we talk about that on Start With a Win. Welcome to Start With a Win, where we unpack leadership, personal growth and development, and how to build a better business. Let's go. Coming to you from Area 15 Ventures and Start With a Win headquarters, it's Adam Contos with Start With a Win. We're joined by someone who's done just that. Industry heavyweight and great friend, Sam Ballas. As the founder and CEO of East Coast Wings and Grill, co-founder of Sammy Sliders, and founder of Zor Ability, Sam's leadership and innovative franchise strategies have earned him a top spot in both the restaurant and franchise space, building business systems. That's important. Sam builds business systems. With over 40 years in the game, he's here to share with you what it takes to build and sustain successful brands over time. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Good to be here, Adam. Good seeing you.
Awesome. Hey, you've been involved in a ton of business over the years, building a lot of systems and processes, exhibiting a lot of leadership. And so everybody knows I'm on the board of the International Franchise Association with Sam. We get to talk business quite a bit. So this is an honor and a pleasure to see my good friend on here. Sam, can you take us back? How did you start in business? How did we get to where we're at today?
Well, as far as the franchising space is concerned, I came from a Wall Street background. I ran some companies out of New York and Manhattan in North Carolina. At the time that franchising hit my doorstep, I was running North Carolina for Hayne Greenberg at AIG. And at the same time, I had a real estate passion, right? So I'm real estate credentialed, have been since 1990. And in that passion of real estate, just wanting to buy some assets, et cetera, I got invited into a transaction with a wing concept, a single store concept. And long story short, as everybody's story goes in building, your asset base or building your career, I was looking at this venture as maybe, an extra $1,000 a month that maybe would pay the mortgage, right? I mean, I was building a family. I've got 4 kids today and I got grandkids today. So back in that day, it was kind of every, $100 bill that you can bring into the hopper, helped. So to fast forward that, I'm a Greek immigrant son. So I grew up in the restaurant space. My family were restaurateurs, right? And it's in my bloodline. And I was the first one to go to college. I was the first one to venture into making money without a spatula in his or her hand, so to speak, right? And it was kind of a wow for the whole family line. And we're a big family. So for me, to look at this opportunity back then that was just an economic opportunity, not knowing what I was going to do with it was crazy for the family. What are you doing? You're getting kind of like the Godfather 3. You're getting pulled back in again, And I'm like, well, it's just an extra, $1,000 bill maybe a month. So long story short, so to speak, it turned into, wow, this is something different, right? I wonder if I can validate and proof this idea out for maybe this kind of growth my family line had done the restaurant space by regionalizing, a dozen locations or 15 locations or 20 locations. So I opened up the second location in a different market, but within a supply chain radius. And so let's see if I can duplicate it. And then I opened the second location of East Coast Wings. At that point, there was no end grill. It was just a wing concept totally. And it did very, very well. So then I got intrigued. So I studied, how do I roll this out differently than I grew up in and sustain an office job environment, so to speak, not being in the grind of the restaurant daily. Kind of appeasing that legacy play of, hey, we came to this country broke, we built some style of wealth, we sent you to college, you got educated. Why are you in the restaurant business, from an immigrant perspective? And I decided to investigate franchising modeling and really spent 2001 really studying the model. I went to a lot of, back that day, Adam, you can probably remember these days where they were doing, hotel rah-rah pitches, right, for brands.
Yep.
I think my first one was Allied Dominic that owned Dunkin' Donuts, and the coffee business, ice cream, They had ice cream as well. So I went to one of those in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I collected, I think in 2.5 years, maybe 2 or 3 dozen of FDDs, which then they were called UFOCs.
Yep.
And so I studied, and I decided that, this might be something I could do differentiating that would make, the family line happy, that I didn't waste the college education, which is never a waste. Any education is good education. But from that immigrant perspective, it was kind of like, get out of the grind of the restaurant space and do something smarter than us. In the meantime, all these guys were getting very wealthy in the restaurant grind. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you're telling me to get out, but you're all driving Mercedes and you all have nice houses. I mean, what's up with this situation?
Right.
That's kind of how I got into it, and just started grinding.
I love it.
Still had the spatula in my hand back in that day, but that's how it started.
There you go. Well, as somebody from a Greek lineage also, I appreciate it. And I think my family was into the restaurant space also. So it's really interesting. You have a lot of Greek immigrants that really get deep into restaurants here. But Sam said a couple of interesting things. And what he was talking about here, I want everybody to notice this. Sam went from horizontal scale of, let's say you have a restaurant, and then you open another restaurant, you open another restaurant. You're in this horizontal scale at that point. And what Sam looked at is, okay, if we get into franchising, you go into this vertical scale. So you start doing, maybe instead of building multiple restaurants, you build systems that build restaurants. And you have restaurant owners within your system that you don't own a restaurant, but somebody else does, but you're still making money on it. So it's fascinating how, when you compare vertical and horizontal scaling within franchising, how you can start building more wealth. And Sam noticed that. He took on to that real quick, with a wealth of business knowledge also, and that entrepreneurial spirit, which we love so much. You pioneered multiple innovative franchise strategies, Sam. So you went from the wings and grill to, you got Sammy Sliders, and you have another business that actually helps with the building of franchises. Take us into your concept of, can you franchise this with Zorability? What started that?
Yeah. So basically, Zorability started with the desire to help emerging brands or help chain style brands who want to enter the franchise model in what we feel like, and I feel like is the correct way to enter it. And what you just described is perfect, right? So I think a founder of a brand has to have a horizontal play, right? You've got to open one, open two, open three, validate, proof. And then before you start going vertical, how do you, in the restaurant space, how you develop the correct supply chain? What does that look like logistically? So for me, it was really critical that I went horizontal because I came from a background that at the Christmas table or the holiday table, if you didn't have a 35-40% NOI, you had to go sit with the kids. Right now, the restaurant space today has completely changed. That's almost unattainable at that high of NOI. But Zorability for me was a brainchild of mine back in 2016 when I started recognizing that I had started kind of the wave of putting EBITDA in print, little old East Coast Wings and Grill, regionalized in the Southeast, 14 years ago in item 19. And all of a sudden, now everybody's putting, percentages and dollar amounts in print as far as earning claims. We, I believe, were maybe the first brand to ever stick a dollar in print to say, hey, this is what my people earned last year on an average of the entire system. So as I started getting people asking me for advice or, hey, can I pick your brain about this culture you've built? And I've got 200 locations or 140 locations. I'm having a hard time. I started realizing, man, there's just so many people that take the horizontal in direction initially, but then get pulled into that vertical too fast, who aren't ready for that. And Zorability for me was a brainchild on the plane flying back from the finance and development, the restaurant show in Las Vegas, and thinking, how do I develop something that I could have a legacy play and it pay back, to to the franchise model to help these emerging brands or re-emerging brands. And on the plane, I just thought, franchisors, and that's really, do you have the ability to be coached? Do you have the ability to, can your brand be franchisable as a vertical? And quite frankly, can you as a founder be franchisable as a vertical, right? And I think there's two distinctions in that has to be really tackled. And so I put Zor and capitalized the A with ability and created Zorability on the 3 hour and 55-minute flight, in the air. And then I invited some people that had talents that I know that restaurant space and Zorability needs. We're exclusive to the restaurant space. And we have helped some non-restaurant brands with just ULE and EBITDA and P&L culture build, et cetera, unit level economics type of build. But for me, it's kind of the legacy play, right? Now, Zorability has brought other opportunities on where you have emerging brands that says, hey, I've gone horizontal, I've gone vertical, and I'm imploding. Something's not right with my vertical. Well, you went vertical too fast. You didn't get your supply chain ready. You're 2 people and you're 8 franchise owners and you're, 12 locations with your corporate stores, and you can't be all the hats forever, right? What does that look like? What does capitalism and that look like? So for me, Zorability was kind of, when I decide to retire one day, which in the franchising space usually is never, right? Because even when you get out of the race of building concepts and building models, you're there consulting or coaching or speaking or whatever. What do I want people to say about my journey and Sam Ballas, to the space? I don't want to be just East Coast Wings and Grill and our consistent drumbeat of unit level economics, using that as a barometer of brand unit growth, which we do laser-like focus and very disciplined. And that's why I'm a regionalized lifestyle brand with that concept. And Zorability is kind of my selfish way of developing that legacy play and giving back to the model.
I love that. And you hit something here that I think is really important. These two components that really have to function together, but actually function separately. And that's the founder piece and essentially the unit level economics piece, or the same store profitability. So when you take a look at and I want to address the founder piece secondarily, but a lot of people think that, okay, I've got something that's making money here or that shows profitability on the bottom line here, so it must be franchisable. That seems like a big fallacy to me, because there are lots of balls being juggled in the air at this time, and there's no system around it.
That's right. It's a huge mistake, right? Because the franchise owner's profitability comes from systems in place, comes from the very definition of franchising, where the founder or founders have gone through all of the weeding of the concept and have identified all the problems, right? And in franchising definition, you're supposed to have the optimal opportunity for success, non-guaranteed, because you can't guarantee that an operator is going to operate once they're on the ground, right? And the arms are in their hands and they're trucking through the field. It's a different mentality than conversating about it, going through discovery day processing, creating a relationship, and launching, a new location. But people need to understand that as founders, the middle of the P&L is where it makes and breaks you. And you can't just take 2 or 3 stores that you're able to make 25 points on or 30 points on or 19 points on and instantly say, man, this is a moneymaker, because there's then operating costs to the franchise owner you've got to retract in order for you to fund the support you have to give them. So you have to understand immediately there's a 6-7% reduction of that NOI for that individual. Then you've got to take into account the debt servicing, right? What is your ratio of development costs? There's so much more involved before you just launch and go. And I tell you, it is astonishing how many brands call us, ones that we decide to work with, ones that we decide not to work with, that have taken that track, right? I've got 2 locations and I'm doing 35 points, 37 points. And I think I can make this I can be the next First Watch in a $1 billion public evaluation, right? And I'm thinking, stop the press. You've got to have supply chain. You've got to have support mechanisms. And then you got to have enough, and you're not going to have the revenue to support that in the first 20, 25, 30 locations, right? So we teach at Zorability that you've got to have some pillars, right? You got to have unit level economics as a culture understood, not just in place. What does that mean? What are you measuring? How are you trying to move the needle? And is those processes and procedures transferable where maybe Adam can embrace it and have a trust with it and roll with it, right? Can they execute that? Huge pillar you've got to figure out. Then you've got to figure out, after a few franchise locations, maybe 3 or 4, you got to stop the press and make sure you massage those owners for maybe a year, even though you're itching to go 20 more. Don't, right? Spend a year with 3 or 4 operators so you then can feel the reality of what they're willing to do or not do, or what they can and can't do, so you can identify how to shift your systems and make them more interstatable, more embraceable, right, for execution. So your franchisee validation is critical as a pillar. And I think you can't do that if you jump out of the chute with 3 or 4 corporate founding locations and sell 30 in 1 year and open up 20. You're going to be too busy trying to figure it out of how just to function, and you're going to miss a lot of critical components that you need to understand to make your system more sound. And the third huge pillar, and when I tell this to brands, even at 100 locations strong that call us, they're like, well, how do you do that? You've got to have a strategy to be royalty sufficient. How fast can you get to, and what does that timeline look like? And what does that unit count look like in order for you not to do a deal and get a license fee in to pay your support expenses as a brand, right? As a corporate model, as a service center model. So that to me is a strategy. How many units based on your AUVs and how you drive the middle of the P&L, and what do you have systems in place for those franchise owners? For me, it was 21 locations, right? I passed 21 locations. I didn't have to do another deal. And I had enough revenue coming in to suffice paying for that support mechanism the franchise owners expect in that agreement they signed, the franchise agreement they've signed. So it is critical, Adam. There's so many components. And my biggest advice to a listener is, if you've got, a half a dozen, 10, 3, 2 locations, don't come with one location. It's not going to do it, right? You have to have 2 or 3 different market locations to validate your product lines and your service lines. Go into franchising smartly when you start your vertical, but maybe no more than 6 locations open for the restaurant space, and stop your press. Have enough funding ready so you can do that for a year, so you can retract the data you need from the franchise owners who are going to tell you in the front lines what's going on, so you can tweak your system to be more sound, helping them. But then that next round of 6 that come in are going to have a better experience. Then you stop it again, tweak that the second year. The next round of 6 come in, even a better experience. When you think you have it clad, where then your intellectual capital gets outgrown by the growth, which is going to happen. I call it a barsmosis, right? David Barrism. It's going to happen that those systems are easily transferable to the next talent that comes in, right? To keep your system moving. So it is a methodical process. And I tell our Zorability clients, and we have them that are from the ground up. We have them that have started that vertical and realized, 10 locations later, nobody's making money. What happened? Well, you shouldn't have gone vertical. The previous advice you was getting maybe a little flawed, maybe too aggressive. But we make them stop franchising, and we call the attorneys, stop the FDD. We got to fix this, because now you have franchise owners' livelihoods on the line, and you're experimenting with their livelihoods. And I think that's just bad franchising. You shouldn't be doing that.
Well, it's interesting because, there's constant evolution going on in here, especially in the early days. And it's also capital intensive, as Sam has said. So I just see so many people come into franchising with just enough money to run one location. And they're like, I'm going to franchise. I'm like, it's going to cost you a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, you talked about the staying power of the capital and be able to fund this thing, but I want to switch over now to the founder piece, because I think this is really important. And something always pops up, and I call it founder syndrome. And that is that they get so enamored in their particular thought or process, or, I've got this amazing way of cutting hair or washing houses or, making a sandwich or whatever it is, that they get lost in that instead of understanding that, you have to be adaptability in order to make, supply chain and customer desires and the franchise location, like you talk about the middle of the P&L work, that founders can't see that sometimes. So how do we find that key aspect, or what do we look for in founders where they have the humility to say, I wasn't quite right on that, or I have to adjust my recipe, or I have to adjust my process in order to make this profitable? Because I've seen it a bunch of times in franchises. I mean, is that a key thing that we need to talk about early on, or does it happen along the way?
First, it's critical, right? Because I do believe that the product lines and the brand and what you've developed, regardless of what you're doing, you could be, power washing, you could be cutting hair, you could be selling sandwiches, you can be selling wings, whatever your process is that you've had success with, right? That has to be validated. 2-3 locations strong, 2 or 3 years in process, and et cetera. That really is the easier part of the two. The founder's got to be franchisable. And, our very first client, and I won't put no names to this, but our very first client at Zorability happened to land in us right as COVID hit, right as the pandemic hit. And I was on a plane in airports, with the National Guard and guns, at the airports, making sure you had your green, check mark to go through. But this individual, although successful in what he did in 2 locations, soon to be 3, although very meticulous at what he did on sourcing product, making sure that it was top quality to the consumer, good sales, good NOI, franchisable number projections. We basically put our executive summary, and we do a discovery with our clients. We have a podding system to help emerging brands make this affordable. They can't come in and sign on to a $100,000 deal to get you consulted or coached into a franchise model. So we charge a small fee and do what we call a discovery, where we basically take your numbers apart. We take your system apart. And then we rebuild that as a scalable interstate model. Does it work? Can we source the same products across state lines? You can't send a franchise owner to the docks to source tuna for a poke bowl concept because the founder had that much passion, right? So we found our very first case that we had to tell the brand, your brand has differentiation, your brand has good logistics, your brand has some numbers that we think have some legs, but unfortunately, we don't think you should franchise. We think you should open up store 4, 5, and 6 maybe, expand to these 2 different territories that we've done some homework for you on, and just live life large. And he called and said, Sam, what happened? I said, to this individual, I said, with all due respect, you're not franchisable. What do you mean? You will not let us restack your recipe cards. You will not let us resource processing. You are not willing to do sourcing through a broadliner for certain product lines. And that is franchising. How do you interstate that if you're not willing to make that bend? And in one case, I had to take a founder, and I said, tell me, who is your best B player in the restaurant? And they identified somebody, and I invited them over. And I said to this person, hey, Mary, meet Adam, your owner, your boss. Okay, what's going on here? Adam, give Mary your checkbook. Give Mary your livelihood. And I want you to walk out that door and not come back for 60 days. And everybody's like at a standstill. And he says, Mary, you can go back to work. Sam, what's going on? I'm like, that's what you're telling the franchise owner to do. You'll tell a franchise owner to walk away when you're recruiting the right talent from what they're doing in a livelihood and have faith in your system and processes based on what you're disclosing. And you're telling them to basically, have some faith and trust that this will work. If you operate it to the guidelines, your checkbook will be full. You can pay your bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You didn't hesitate one iota to send her away instead of saying, great, checkbook's in the top drawer. I'll see you in 60 days. And that's what a franchise founder has to be able to do. You've got to have that confidence level in what you're developing where you can hand that checkbook to your B player. I didn't ask for your A stud or studus. If that's even a word. I sniggled it there.
Now it is, Sam.
I've aged myself, right? With SNL. But, the reality is I've had to tell an owner to do that.
Yeah.
And every occasion, they just freeze. And I'm like, you have to be able to take coaching and look at it from a different lens, because now you're going and you're recruiting what you feel like is like, kind, necessary talent. But you can't guarantee yourself or even them when they open that location, how will they perform? Will they freeze on a really busy $14,000 day of opening, which we've had in East Coast Wings and Grill, and our new franchise owners just freeze in the kitchen? Like, okay, I'm lost. What do I do? Right. Do you have the ability to navigate that? Do you have the ability when you don't have any sales? You're doing an average of 4 and you did $1,200 that first day and everybody's panicking day one. How do you navigate that process? You have to have complete confidence in your system that you can support that. And some founders can't make that turn. They just can't, they look at the bottom line numbers of expectation, and in some cases get a little overwhelmed with the big fat check maybe one day on the exit, and they get blinded. They can't see the forest despite the trees. So some owners founders need to be told, you just shouldn't franchise. And we've done that probably 25% of our cases as Zorability.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, a lot of things to think about in franchising, both as a franchisee and as a franchisor. I mean, there's no guarantee in any of this. And the fact that you want to franchise doesn't mean that you can, which I get that. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Sam, there's so much to learn here, and there's a lot more than what we can fit into this podcast. Where can people find you and Zorability online?
Well, they can go to sballas@zorability.com and link me there. Or they can call the office at 336-760-4985.
Wow. Okay. And there's got to be a piece of advice, that you've given franchisees and franchisors that you lean on quite a bit, and maybe it forms your life and how you run your business. But what is a key piece of advice you would give to one of these people that are interested in, maybe they're already in franchising, or maybe they want to get in franchising, but give us a good piece of business advice here.
So in franchising, the franchisor owes and is responsible for the franchise owner's optimal and success as far as the system. So my advice is drive your system growth from the franchise owner's perspective in. Don't outgrow or outpunt your ability to service the franchise owner, driving ULE and driving net operating income. So if you'll build your brand with the franchise owner foremost, the most important part, two important things in franchising: franchise owners and franchise owners' profitability. If you'll build your system that way, you'll find a slower building process, because it's a lot of work to do it that way, but you'll find higher quality results and easy validation as you grow your business.
Gotcha. Great. And Sam, I have a question I ask all of the amazing leaders on Start With a Win. And I'm sure you have a fun answer. You're just a blast of a guy. It's a good time to see you at these different events. How do you start your day with a win?
Well, it's funny. I get a cup of coffee every morning, and I take my dog outside, and I get my phone in the other hand. And while my dog's taking care of nature's business, I'm looking at my reports that I get every afternoon before everybody leaves on what happened yesterday on a specific benchmarking KPI analysis that I look at. And then that tells me when I go into the office if there's anything that I feel like I should jump into to help steer something a little more aggressive than what the team's doing. And I do that religiously every morning.
Wow. I love it. Know your numbers and stick to the plan there. So and take care of your dog at the same time. I mean, that's a great plan there. Sam Ballas, you've done so much in franchising and business growth. We appreciate all that you do. And it's great to call you friend. It's great to be on the board with you, the International Franchise Association. And thank you for starting with a win.
Absolutely.